Hi and welcome to this video in the MRDCL EPS series, and in this video we're going to look at the real basics of putting together some EPS script that will read a worksheet for me. And you can see what I've got here already is a worksheet that has a workbook that has a worksheet called Q1, and in that worksheet I've got a list of codes running from 1 down to 20 in column A. And here I've just got one brand in here called brand A. Now I'm going to write a script that's going to read and just pick up the brands that are present in my worksheet. Now to do this, it should be stressed you should have a good knowledge of the MRDCL preprocessor. So you already should be familiar with things like do loops, the set command and skip command. They really are essentials to understand them fully before you start working with EPS. So to do this, I've got to tell MRDCL that I want to work through this worksheet from the top to the bottom and pick up the codes that are present. Now, whereas when you write a do loop in MRDCL, you would say something like do A equals 1:20 to go from 1 to 20, a loop in when you're using EPS starts at the top of the workbook or the worksheet and goes to the bottom. Now you can get it to start at a different row from the top, but in almost all cases you'll be starting at the top of the worksheet and ending at the bottom of the worksheet. So let's just do that, and now let's start to work on a script that I'm going to write. So here we go. I've already put in just the basics of a script. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to open this workbook. So I can say db open, and that will give me the command to open this workbook, and I'm going to give the workbook a name. Now you can give that any index name you like. You could call it A, you can call it any piece of any text name or alpha name. So I'm going to call mine dbxls. You could also open access tables in the same sort of way as I'm showing you here, but I'm going to confine this video to just opening up an Excel workbook and reading one worksheet. So I'm opening DBXLS, I'm calling it DBXLS, and what I want to open, if we just go back to it, is a workbook. You can see at the top there called myworkbook.xls. So I'm going to call it myworkbook.xlsx and close that. And again, that's going in square brackets like all preprocessor commands do. EPS commands are just a special form of preprocessor commands. This could have a path, so it could say that it is in Z colon if I wanted to, so it could be in a shared place that other people used. Now it's good practice also to close that XLS workbook when you've finished. So I'm going to close it at the end of my data stage when I've finished with it. Now I've opened it and closed it, in between those two statements, I can actually do something with it. So what I want to do here, I'm going to pick up a variable which we call Q1 for example, and I'm going to say that it's going to pick up a brand that's coded in field of 10 to 11. Now what I want it to do is to pick up all the brands that are present. So I'm going to add a few more in, brand C, brand G, and we'll do the 12th one here, which is brand L, and we'll do the 20th one, which will be brand T. So there's the brand. So there's 5 brands in this code list. The other codes aren't used. I just want to pick up 1, 3, 7, 12, and 20. And if this worksheet were to change, I want it to automatically make the change for me. So let's look at how we do that. Now we pick up the codes here by looping through the worksheet. So whereas you've got a do A command that picks up a loop in other parts of the preprocessor, here we say I want to set a DB loop. So DB stands for database, and the database in this case is an Excel file. I'm going to call this loop DB1. I could call it A if I want to. I've chosen to call it DB1 here, so I'm going to quickly retype that. And it's going to pick up from the workbook called DBXLS, and the worksheet name is Q1. So there it is, Q1 down the bottom. So that's the worksheet name, and that's separated by a semicolon. And to close that loop, I would end DB1. So that's just like a do loop in the other parts of MRDCL that you should be familiar with, but I'm opening a loop here called DB1, and what that loop will do will mean it will start here at the top and it will go all the way to the bottom. So now I'm going to loop through. Now if I just put in this piece of code and say I want to pick up db1.code, what that will do is pick up the codes in here. So it's going to pick up all of the 20 codes. So let's just see if it does that for me and see if it does it correctly. So let's run this. Now it's good practice usually to actually shut the workbook, because it does slow the run down if you leave it open. This workbook, as it's only got one sheet, won't slow it down much, but a big workbook would slow it down. So for convenience, I am going to leave it open here, but it's not good practice to do so. Right, let's run this, let's compile it, and let's see what happens. And if we look at our listing file, we can see that it's picked up all 20 codes, but it's picked them up as 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Now that's because the ODBC controller, the Microsoft controller that reads this Excel workbook, returns a value in 1 decimal place. So that's no good. We need to amend our code here. And I'm going to put in set code to db1.code. So it's setting to a variable. Let's perhaps call it the code so it has a different name. So the code is going to pick up the value in the column headed code from the worksheet, which is in the workbook, my workbook.xlss, in the worksheet called Q1. So that's going to pick up the code, and now, with a bit of luck, it should do what I want. So let's look at the listing file now, and sure enough, I've got all 20 codes that were in that worksheet. But I don't want all 20 codes. I only want the codes where there's something in the text column. So I only want to pick up 1, 3, 7, 12, and 20. So we can do that using a skip command. So what I'm going to say is, if there's nothing in the text column, I want to skip the code and not pick up code 2. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say skip 99 string db1.text not equal to nothing, and I'm going to skip all this code here where it's nothing. So this is like a normal skip command that you use in the preprocessor. The difference is here I'm adding the word string in here to indicate that I'm picking up the string or the text that's in the column headed text. And I'm skipping over this code when it's when it is equal to 0. So when it's blank. So when the text is blank, I want to skip over it. When it's not blank, I want to pick up the code. So let's try it again now. Look at our code, and sure enough, now we're just picking up 1, 3, 7, 12, and 20. Now we want to do the same thing with the text. So we come outside this loop here, and we can say x equals quote db loop, start db loop, db1 equals dbxls semicolon q1, so the same worksheet, and I want to do the same thing again, skip 99 string db1.text equal to nothing. But this time in here, I want db1.text with a semicolon after it, star db end, db1, and I want a quote, comma at the end to close it. And in here, I've missed out the star 99, so I put that back in as well. And let's see what happens, because this isn't going to quite work as I want it. Okay, it's given me an error, and I know why that is. And the error is that it's put a semicolon after the brand T and then put the quote comma. So it's actually thinking I've got 6 labels here for 5 responses. So we need to skip this last semicolon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a count in here of how many codes it actually picks up. So in here, I will know how many codes I picked up. And in here, I can do the same thing. I can say got equals 0. In here, I can say got equals got plus 1. Now what I want to do is I want to skip that semicolon when I get to the 6th or the 5th and final response. So we're picking up 5 codes here. Count will have a value of 5 here. It will start at 0. Each time it finds a valid code, and there's 5 of them, it will step it up by 1. So I'll have 5 in the set of value of count. I'm doing the same thing here with got, which means that when I get to here, I can say skip 99 on count equal to got. So it will just skip over that semicolon when I've got every text that I want. Now if I compile it, you can see what it's doing. It's skipped that semicolon because it knows I had 5 codes here, and when it gets to the 5th label, it is going to skip it for me. Now, just to check that this is working properly, we should be able to add a brand into here, and it will automatically update. So let's add in brand J, and let's add in one more down here. Let's do brand R. Now, if I just save this, and don't forget to save it, without changing the MRDCL script at all, it should recognize those extra brands. So you can see now that it's added in the extra brands 10 and 18, or the codes, and the brands J and R, and my script works without me editing the script at all. Now you might say that's not a huge advantage doing it that way. I could have just keyed that in using usual MRDCL script. It wouldn't have been too difficult to do that. The first point to make is if that code sheet was ever likely to change, it's going to automatically update without me touching my script. But let's go one step further and see what else we can do. We could parameterize this so that the whole thing would work for any open-ended question at all. And we could drive that from parameters. So in here, I could say something like data OE, we'll call it OE for open-ended, is Q1. It comes from the field 10 to 11, and it's going to take the texts from the worksheet called Q1 as well. If it was always going to be the same name, I wouldn't need to repeat the Q1. Now what I can do is I can say insert OE code, and I can then take this code out, open up a new file called oecode.stp, paste in this code, and now make it general purpose so that it'll work for anything. So this now becomes OE.1, so it's the first item in the data statement called OE. This worksheet becomes OE.3, and that's perfectly okay to have 2 square brackets. And then I can work through this as well, and the columns come from OE.2. Oops, I just typed that wrongly. And this down here also comes from OE.3. And I think now I've made all the changes to make this general purpose. Now what this means, now that I've made it general purpose code, it means if I've got another code list that's like this, so let's just copy this, and rename it. Let's call it question 5 this time. And let's say the codes for question 5 are brand AA, brand BB. Let's delete some to make sure it's different. Let's put brand LL in here, brand NN, and delete those and put brand SS in here. You can now see I've got some different codes, same system, they're headed code and text, but I'm picking up some different codes. To implement question 2 now, all I need to do is copy that piece of code, set it to question 2, say it's columns 13 to 14, and to use the worksheet question 2 for the texts. And let's say that, in fact I made it question 5, so let's just quickly correct that before I run it. And let's say that question 6 uses different columns, of course, but actually uses the same codes as question 5. I could put in question 6 as coming from 15 to 16, but using the texts and labels and codes from question 5. Let's save that. Let's just save that again to be sure. Again, I should close this really. And now I've got a nice automated system in place that picks up Q1 with the brands there, picks up Q5 with the brands there, and you can see that Q6 is picking up the same as codes and texts as question 5 because it's sharing the same worksheet. So although it perhaps wasn't a huge benefit when I had just question 1, now we've got questions 1, 5 and 6, you can see that I'm able to put in a really quick way of picking up all this code using a function. And indeed I could have used a worksheet that reads the other worksheets to control everything, but that's going to be covered in subsequent videos. So in here I've taught you the basics of how to put in a very simple template. We've converted it into a general purpose piece of code that calls OE code.stp. This piece of code here could go on the server, for example, so that anybody could use it. So we could, for example, rather than inserting OE code, that could be sitting on a server so that anybody could use it and access the EPS template that's been designed here. But I haven't done it here. It's all being done locally on my one machine. So that completes this video on the real basics. In the subsequent videos, we'll look at some more challenging tasks and build some really clever templates that can be used on different projects. But that's the end of this video.